Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm the host of the Transformational Conversations podcast, and today I'm here with Dylan from Oval, and we're talking about metabolic health and how sometimes doing less is actually doing more. Well, hey, Dylan, welcome to the Transformational Conversations podcast. Thank you for being here and taking time today to do this. So before we get started, I wanted to get to know you a little bit and get to know why you got into what it is that you do.
I mean, I had a healthy interest in exercise when I was growing up. I wanted to get faster and stronger for athletics that I was playing. I was a soccer player and a sprinter. And then as I got into things like weightlifting, I found out that I was had a pretty, high success rate with what I was doing there too. And I got more interested in doing those things. And it became something that I wanted to pursue professionally after that.
And when you pursued it professionally, what did that look like?
I went to University of Florida. I did my background there in exercise physiology and biomechanics. I started my career professionally in more on the performance side of things, Division I athletics, and some professionals, things like that. And then kind of over time started to transition more into things like executive health. And that's kind of where I got involved with the company I work for now.
Okay, awesome. And the company you work for now is called Oval.
Right.
And we did an awesome test at my house that we'll get into. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about what Oval is, like what you guys stand for, and why it's so important today that people understand more about like their lactate threshold.
Yeah, so Oval's a metabolic health platform. I think there's still a lot of confusion about what the word metabolism or metabolic health even means. Mm-hmm. And at this point in time, when you hear that spoken about, it's usually in relation to blood sugar management or as a correction for things like metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is this condition where you have high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high triglycerides, high waist circumference, and low HDL cholesterol. And if you meet three of those criteria, you have metabolic syndrome. And metabolic disease is really the costliest thing in healthcare right now in this country. There's nothing really in the way that we approach this right now that fixes the root causes. There's a lot of behavioral management tools that are great, and obviously nutrition is really important. But it's a lot of trying to put better fuel in your car versus trying to build a better engine.
Interesting. I like that. That's a really good metaphor. The really interesting thing that we did when we measured my threshold through the Metflex was I understood that I was performing, or I was trying to perform incorrectly. Everything I'd always done my whole life was maximize my output, train when tired. I remember when I was a hockey player, 100 years ago, all of the coaches, all of the trainers were always trying to get you tired and then have you push through that because that's where you thought that you would optimize and become better than the next guy. What I learned from speaking with you through my test was that's incorrect. And I was training improperly, non-functionally. I was burning out. I was getting injured. I was always tired. I was having, chronic illnesses, and I was putting my body through this extreme level of effort for minimal results. And I think that's what a lot of people do, especially in sport. We have this concept of overtraining now, but when I was playing sport, if you weren't overtraining, you weren't on the team.
Right.
So what is it that people need to know about overtraining and how it's linked to the lactate threshold, your Metflex test, and where they really should be training?
Sure. So I think right now our culture really says that if you really want to accomplish something, you should go out there and work harder for longer and more frequently. And, that's the things that lead to burnout. There are still capacities that our body has, whether we like them or not. And when we're talking about things like performance, whether that's military performance or sports performance, or even people that are high performers in the executive space, we're kind of taught that you should try to push through what those capacities are, and the limits are still the limits. And when you're putting a lot of undue or excessive stress on your body, there are consequences to that. So the idea with this is that think of your metabolism as being like the operating system on your phone. So whether you have an Android device or an Apple device, every so often it'll tell you there's a software upgrade overnight. So the system that underpins everything that your phone can do, all the applications that it can run. Your metabolism is really like your body's operating system. It powers all of these applications that your body can run, like turning the food that you eat into energy that your body can use, your hormone production, your immune system, how your body expresses the genes that you carry are all like applications that your body can run, but it's still limited by the overall health of your metabolism and metabolic system. And unfortunately, as we get older and because of the stresses that we're all exposed to, there's a degradation that happens over time. And right now, most people aren't measuring the health of their metabolism. So they have no real way of trying to push back on that and improve it if they can't measure it accurately. And that's really the whole purpose of this company and this test, is to accurately measure what someone's metabolic flexibility is. I think we'll get into that here in a second as well, what that means, and then give people some actionable ways to improve that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, back to the test, I never even understood that I went from burning fat to burning carbs.
Yep.
That was new to me as someone that's been training my whole life in the wellness space. I understood it, theoretically,
Yep.
but I never understood we could measure it through a test or understanding. When I first started training for my Ironman, my teammates or the people I was running it with would laugh at me because I was running 3 miles or 5Ks at my ultimate capacity, and I was just trying to get my per mile time lower.
Right.
And it was doing nothing for the longevity of my performance.
Yep.
I was just, egotistically trying to lower that mile time. And someone told me you need to run slower, build your zone 1, zone 2 capacity. And it wasn't until we met that I really understood why. So what does it mean when someone goes from burning fat to carbohydrates, and why is that so important to us?
So the body's kind of ingeniously designed to take advantage of 2 different fuel sources for different purposes. Think of a fireplace, and I can have a log in the fireplace, and that's like fat burning. It's going to burn low and slow all night. So fat is very energy dense, but it takes a longer period of time to transform into an energy currency that your body can use. There has to be a trade-off to that because sometimes we need things to happen faster, and that's where carbohydrates come in. So think of carbohydrates being like crumbling a piece of paper up and tossing that on the fireplace, and there's a huge plume of flames, and then it's gone. So carbohydrates are not nearly as energy dense as fats, but they can be converted into usable fuel a lot more quickly. Because we don't store carbohydrates very effectively, they have to be replenished versus fat, which we can store all over the place. So we're designed this way for a reason. And, as we reach certain levels of intensity of activities that we're doing, there has to be a conversion that takes place from being primarily a fat burning organism for things that are of low to moderate intensity to converting to carbohydrates when necessary. And you should be able to transform between those 2 things pretty effectively. And we lose that ability over time.
Yeah. And do you see that a lot of people are living in the carbohydrate world that are just burning carbs? There was the term of carb loading for my long-term event when I did the half Ironman, and
Right.
Randomly someone reached out to me over Instagram and said that it's more important to build your fat burning capacity, and I thought nothing of it. And now I look back and I think that person's a genius. But I'm thinking about it in terms of burnout. When you're chronically stressed, when you're chronically overwhelmed, you're putting yourself through like a metabolic strain through your mind.
Yep.
Does that lead to someone being stuck in like a carb dominant usage?
It would contribute, right? So stresses are stresses, whether they're physical stresses that we impose on our bodies or psychological stresses that we're under because of our jobs and our families, or chemical environmental stresses. There's still an overall capacity. Think of a glass, and there's only so much the glass can hold. Even exercise is really a stress. And, if you're not managing all these stresses effectively, if the system that has to be able to run these things isn't powerful enough, then at some point the glass is going to spill over.
Yeah.
And then it gets expressed in a variety of different ways. So yes, if you're trying to juggle all these things that we all are, keep all the plates spinning all the time, then there's a good chance that you're going to exceed whatever that capacity is and then have expressions of that someplace in your life. So the stronger we can make the system that has to power all these things, the more resilient it becomes. And then in terms of the appropriate training, you want to do what's necessary without having to do any more than that. We don't want to put undue stresses on our bodies because there are consequences to that too.
Absolutely. And I think that's where fitness world and wellness world don't intersect, is that, sometimes in the fitness world, it's push, push, push. We have
Right.
these high intensity workouts, lifting, long distance running. Even when I was training a long time ago for hockey, the focus on sleep, nutrition, recovery just wasn't there. And I was working with some of the top trainers back then, and I was actually working with Gary Roberts, and he was one of the only people in the space that was talking about nutrition, sleep, and recovery. And as a younger kid, and like 14, 15, I thought he was crazy. But sleep is really, really important, and the impact that it has on our metabolism, on our overall health and well-being. But people don't know that they can actually train their metabolism.
Yep.
So what I learned through the Metflex, the lactate threshold test, was that I have a specific score, and
Yep.
we can get into that. And I can train that to make it stronger, which actually enables me to deal with stress better in a higher capacity because, like you said, the engine or the operating system becomes so much stronger. So if you don't know what your score is, if you don't know where you reside, it's almost impossible to grow it because you'll be overtraining or causing distress. And that's what I've been doing for so long. But now that I know where I reside, I can grow that. We can do another test. Hopefully I've improved it, and other people can do the same. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the Metflex test, how Oval designed it. There's a few ways to do it, but the way that we did it was really, really cool.
So it's a submaximal test on an exercise bike. The body is not static. We're always moving. So we can't assess the body under static conditions either. So we don't have to go to, an ultimate level of failure in order to see what we really want to see here. So it becomes approachable for basically anybody of all fitness levels. But we want to know at what point during an increasingly difficult test on an exercise bike does your body have to switch from burning fat primarily to using carbohydrates to continue to power what you want to do. Because if we can identify where that turning point, that lactate threshold takes place, then we can give you really specific, appropriate guidance for you in this moment in time to improve that.
And you were pricking my ear
Right.
at specific points. So just to understand how the test actually works, what was going on there? So we started at a baseline.
Yep.
And we grew from there. But
Yep.
every period, was it a minute and a half?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. We'd do a new prick, measure it, and you'd get a lactate score.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
lactate is, again, kind of something that is going through a little bit of a rebranding process in terms of our level of understanding of what it really is and what it does. 25 years ago now, when I was still in college, it was a metabolic waste product, and it was considered maybe the reason why we fatigue and that you have burning sensations in your muscles. And now we know that it's actually something a lot different than that. So in order to take the food that you consume and turn that into energy that you can use, ATP, your body has to do a bunch of conversions. So your food's broken down into things like carbohydrates and fats and proteins and digested. But then there are a number of chemical steps that have to take place in order to turn that into ATP. And lactate is really this end stage of carbohydrate metabolism. So as your body is turning carbohydrates that you have consumed into an energy you can actually use for activity, lactate becomes this final step that it wants to send all over your body to your heart and your brain and your muscles for usage, because your body likes to use those things for currency, energy currency, but only if you can get it there. So we're always making lactate and then shuttling it to parts of our body for use. And we want to see how effectively is your body doing that as we ask increasingly difficult demands of it. And that's what we're doing during your test, is starting out at a baseline, figuring out, what kind of lactate is your body producing and then shuttling to other parts of your body. And then as we increase the intensity of what you're doing on the bike by measuring wattage, then how does your body react to that? At what point do we see, observe in real time, where that turning point takes place?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we see marathon runners able to go the distance where if I were to run a marathon, I'd be converting to carbs by like mile 3.
Right.
It's because they've trained that threshold, they've grown it. And my assumption is they're probably staying well within their lactate threshold for the majority of that race.
That's the idea. So when you see an endurance athlete like a marathoner or a Tour de France cyclist, they've especially spent a lot of their time, like 80% of their time, training this fat oxidative tank, building a huge fuel tank for burning fat at even really, really high demands, and then delaying their dependency on carbohydrates to fuel that race until they absolutely need it. It might be a final push, something like that. But because we can store fat all over the place, it essentially becomes an infinite fuel source if you can still operate within your body's capacities.
Yeah.
So they've developed this really, really high capacity for fat burning, even at really, really high intensities. And then they're only tapping into carbohydrates when they have to.
So is that something that's optimal even for, let's just say, a CEO of a large company to build that fat burning resource or that engine that's fat burning so that they, don't become reactive, they don't become burnt out, they don't overwork and become distressed? Is that something that can help even that type of person in that scenario?
Absolutely. Yeah. And even people that just want to consider their general health, this is really what is going to underpin all of the other health metrics that we're so concerned about. So, what we found when you did your test, you got a numerical score. Your Metflex index is Oval's proprietary score for what is the health and flexibility of your metabolism. And on a 0 to 100 scale, what we found over 5 or 6 years of data collection was that if we can get people to 40 on that scale, that all of the other health metrics that we care about, your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, all of these things get better collectively beyond 40 because you've just improved, you've elevated the performance in the system that underpins all of those things. So if we just improve the overall system itself through movement, it's not one of these sort of misconceptions as well, is that how do I improve my metabolism? And it's primarily by doing some very specific intentional movement. And we'd figure out exactly where that is from your test.
Yeah, and then you're designing someone's zone 2, essentially.
Basically, I mean, that's where we're doing the steady state is our version of zone 2, which conceptually still very much holds up with the research. The challenge with that is that without measuring where that is for every individual person, we're still guessing.
Absolutely.
So when we measure your heart rate training zones on your Oval Smart test, what we're identifying is, where is your specific zone 2, but the heart rate zones that we give you are also positioned specifically right underneath this turning point, your lactate threshold, so that not only are you sitting inside of your zone 2, but this is the most stimulatory this exercise can be in terms of encouraging your body to use fat at its maximum capacities.
Yeah, absolutely. Because for some people, going for a walk with your dogs might be out of zone 2.
It might be.
It might be way out of zone 2, but for some people, it might not be. And to not know what the zone 2 is, I'm wearing my Oura Ring, that can be, detrimental to your fat burning engine. So I learned a lot from just that one session with you doing the test and understanding that. And there's I'm reading a book, and psychologically it shows that I think there was a test of two different or the same people, but they were maids at a hotel, and they told one of the groups of maids that the work that they were doing was exercise, and they didn't say anything to the other group. And the maids that understood that it was exercise actually had better physiological results than the maids that didn't think that it was exercise. So is there implication to just the simple understanding of this principle of fat burning versus carb burning? Because I know it's the one thing that plays over in my head anytime I go to do any movement.
Right.
I walked the dogs today, and I was like, I'm not checking my heart rate, but I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about staying in this fat burning engine zone. And because I understood the MAID test and the psychology behind it, I was almost setting the intention for myself to grow that zone.
Right.
So what are your thoughts? Can your mind impact your lactate score, your Metflex score?
Well, it's certainly super relevant,
Yeah.
you know, and I think once you've taken a test like this, if you're not monitoring what you're doing, you're probably always going to wonder, like you were, am I really where I should be in terms of, you know, the kind of exercise that I'm doing or the intensity that I'm performing it at or not? And I think it's challenging for a lot of people to understand like what those implications are. So when we give you these kinds of scores, it's essentially like a Goldilocks zone where this is the most stimulatory that your body, you know, the most stimulation we can provide your body in this circumstance. And if you're coming in underneath that, then you're probably still primarily burning fat for energy, but it's not encouraging your body to get any better at doing that and being able to do that at higher and higher levels. If you're exceeding that without knowing that, then you're really forcing your body to burn carbohydrates to power what you're doing and then replacing them over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So for people, especially in our culture where, you know, again, we're encouraged to go out there and get after it and work harder, that you're probably not doing what you think you're doing if you're going out there and working really, really hard.
Yeah. It's like a weight loss. The interesting thing with weight loss, if someone wants to lose weight, probably the first thing they're going to do is try to exercise.
Right.
And they're going to be outside of their zone 2, their Metflex zone, almost by accident. But the first thing they're going to do is get into carb burning, probably lead to a little bit of burnout, tough recovery, and not do exactly what they want to do.
Right. So for that person that's made the decision, right, that they're ready to commit to something like weight loss and they're ready to, you know, put the effort in, it's really discouraging when you're willing to do the work, but you're not getting what you perceive to be what the benefits ought to be.
Yeah.
And a lot of times because people are just overworking what their current capacity is for that.
Yeah.
So if we can identify where that sweet spot is, we can give people some very specific direction. And then by spending some time there, then that will improve and they can work harder and at higher rates and still be burning fat for energy. And then things start to snowball.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. Just this past couple of weeks, I'd been struggling a little bit with burnout, and I did it to myself mentally, but I know that it affected my scores. My HRV was dramatically lower. It was like half. I was waking up tired, physically exhausted. I was being reactive in my own brain and probably out loud. And I know that a lot of people are operating from that state of chronic stress, overwork, overburdened, and just burnt out.
Yep.
What's somebody in that state that wants to, you know, expand, understand, and feel better? What's their first step? Because when I was burnt out, you know, I wanted to rest more. Rest wasn't productive because I was still stressed.
Right.
And I, you know, something that I really found helped me was to, you know, meditate. But it's almost that tipping point. So when I forget about it, it starts to get better. Or when I, you know, let it go, but it's so hard to get there logically.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on somebody that, you know, and I think that a lot of us feel it. Like we have data on our platform that shows that 77% of people feel burnout at least once a week. So they're overdoing it. Whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, we're overdoing it. We understand we are, but we continually do it.
Right. Life is stressful. We have jobs and kids and bills to pay. And I think we basically have two different nervous system states, right? You have a sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight or freeze, really. That's meant to be something that helps us to react in times of danger, but not a place we should be staying in all the time. And then you have your parasympathetic state, which is your rest and recovery place where we should be spending most of our time. And then again, have that kind of flexibility to go back and forth based on the demands that are put on us. And a lot of us are out here running around in sympathetic states all the time. And it's really, really not sustainable. So another thing that we can figure out from a test like this is how to retrain your body to come back down from chronically elevated stress levels. So, you know, if you've heard of interval training before, HIIT training, things like that, a lot of times in our culture, when you see that practiced, it's to go up to a really high demand and then kind of red line here for a period of time, or to do some sort of, you know, hills and valleys, do something stressful and then introduce a recovery phase in between, but it's still not really appropriate recovery based on how your body has reacted to these demands. What we can do with the right information from a test like this is perform interval training, but in a way that teaches your body how to come back down from chronically elevated stress levels and come back to that parasympathetic state where it can experience what good recovery should be.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us never get out of the sympathetic nervous system. We go to bed in it. There's brainwave states associated with everything. And I think for a long time I was stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. When I did the damage to my head and was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, the physical symptoms from the illness and the injury were something, but I pushed myself into fight or flight. And I was stuck there, and a lot of people are living there. So the implications of something like a HIIT workout when you're in chronic stress are detrimental. So when I wasn't feeling the best this past week, I still did a workout because I was like, it's part of my routine.
Right.
And it made me crash really hard the next day. So now that I'm a little bit more aware, a little bit more wise, and not so egotistical, I took Thursday and Friday off. Was still down and out on the weekend, and I woke up today feeling a lot better. So I was able to get back in the gym. But we're like trained as a society that health is, output,
Right.
or well-being is output, finances are output. All of these things are output. So what you're telling us, what your test is telling us is that it's output, but it's a much more reduced and capable output, which should be great, which should be awesome to hear. But it's so hard for, people to understand, not even understand that, just to accept that I wanted to do less to do more,
to get more.
Yeah.
And I think there's a time and a place for everything. Mm-hmm. And the application that we use, that all of your data goes into after your test, provides the day-to-day guidance for what should I be doing. Mm-hmm. So if you decided today that you were going to do some interval training, you wear a heart rate monitor. It can be, whatever device that you choose to wear, a Whoop or, an Apple Watch, things like that. And we're going to monitor heart rates while you're doing your exercise. And when we've done your test, we already understand where those training zones should be. So when you start an interval program, we would start you out in a warm-up phase and prepare your body for something more intense. And then we'd ask you to go up there, let's touch that HIIT number, and then have you stop what you're doing, straddle the treadmill, stop pedaling, whatever it is that you're doing as your modality. And then the app actually measures what that recovery looks like.
Interesting.
And then says, hang on, you're not ready to go again yet. Wait a little bit longer. Or sometimes it will even say, look, you're not recovering effectively today. Today is not your day to be doing this. You should go back and do your steady state training today because that's more appropriate right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where I was. I needed to do more steady state training or nothing at all. So I absolutely love this conversation. I want to continue it. I want to take it in every direction we can. But for the people listening in our community, a lot of them, their biggest struggle is the nervous system deregulation. So you talked about the parasympathetic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system. That's like speaking my love language. And what's, in your opinion, maybe not scientifically, but it can be if you want it to be, how can someone that's stuck in the sympathetic nervous system dive into that parasympathetic nervous system a little bit to increase recovery, expand, their lactate threshold, and get back to living a life more comfortably and out of that fight or freeze response?
I mean, I think you touched on some of those things yourself as well. Like I do a lot of meditation,
Interesting.
A lot of gratitude work.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for in being thankful for where you are, finding a reason to be happy with the things that you're are currently in your life, even if they're not where you really want to be. And that goes a long way towards reducing those internal stresses back to a place where your body can recover and be more effective and sustainable.
Yeah.
And there's times and places to do the training piece. There's times when I think I just need to take a day off today. And for people that are constantly wired to think I need to do something to produce the end result that I'm looking for, that can be really counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the best thing you can do, I think, is just take a day off and spend time with your family and pursue things that you really enjoy and allow your body to reset too.
Yeah, well, Dylan, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm sure we'll do more. And is there anywhere that you'd like us to be able to reach you? We'll put it all in the show notes, but if you'd like to say it now, where can we reach you if you want to learn more about what Oval has to offer and what you guys do? Sure.
Our website is oval.care, C-A-R-E. And if anybody has any specific questions, my email address is dwinters@oval.care. Feel free to reach out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dylan. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.